This is a video that walks through our inventory flow chart at Plato's Closet. So first of all, we start up here where the clothing is bought in from the customer. All the clothing we get, our customers sell to us, so this is when we purchase the clothing from the customer. After that, it gets tagged. So it goes to our tagging station, and we put the tags on the clothing. And then we need to decide, is it in demand? So essentially what that means is whatever the weather is or the season is, this type of clothing people are currently shopping for. So for example, a heavy jacket in the middle of summer would not be in demand, just like women's shorts probably aren't in demand in the dead of winter. If it is not in demand, then it gets backstocked. And backstocked is basically when it gets put into a bin for later use to go onto the floor at a later date. However, if it is in demand, then it needs to be replenished. And by replenish, this means it goes directly out on the floor. So this straight to floor just tagged is an actual section in the store. Typically, this will be behind the counter somewhere. So after we tag clothing that's designated to go straight onto the floor, it goes into the straight to floor just tag section. This section could be a Z-rack or a bin or something, so just check with your store manager to see where this is. And then the item is eventually replenished, which happens several times a day. And again, by replenish, this means you take the clothing and you put it in whatever section it should be in out on the sales floor. So when you take this item to be replenished, one thing that could come up is there might not be room. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is there room? So let's say you're replenishing women's shorts and you want to know if there's room out there. If the rack is jam-packed, then the answer would be no. But if there's space, then the answer would be yes. If the answer is no, then this is going to go to a different section in the store called straight to floor backlog. So there is straight to floor just tagged and straight to floor backlog. These are two different sections in the store. Straight to floor just tagged are items that have just been tagged and are waiting to go out into the floor. Straight to floor backlog are also items waiting to go out into the floor, but these are items in which there's no room to put them. So at this point, if something needs to be replenished but there's no room on the floor, it goes into the straight to floor backlog. And then only an inventory manager or an inventory specialist will take care of this. So for most employees, they would just put the item in the straight to floor backlog and then move on to the next item. If there's no room for women's shorts, and they move on to the next section, and let's say that's women's tank, so then they would go to the women's tank section, ask if there's room. If the answer is yes, they put it out in the rack. We'll go into handling the straight to floor backlog later. So now we're going to put something out on the floor. There is room. So we're going to put out in the rack, and then hopefully it just gets sold. And it gets sold by a customer, then it's out of the store. However, it's possible it might not get sold. So if it doesn't sell, the other alternative is it's going to stay on the rack and it's going to get older and older and older until eventually it's going to be pulled to make room. Now, things could get pulled to make room either because we're preparing for a clearance cycle, or it could be pulled to make room because we need to make room for fresh inventory that we just bought. So one way or another, it'll get pulled from the rack. Once it's pulled to make room, then we need to ask ourselves, is the item good? And by good, we mean that it's in good style and condition. And by good style and condition, that essentially means if a customer were to come in today and try to sell us the clothing, we would still buy it. If the customer were to bring the same piece of clothing in today and we would not buy it, then that means it's not good style or condition. In addition to being good style and condition, something is considered good if it's in good style and condition and is less than 90 days old. By less than 90 days old, what we mean is that it has been out on the sales floor for fewer than 90 days. This does not mean that it was bought less than 90 days ago, although in many cases that will be the case because most of our clothing goes directly out into the floor. But in some cases, for example, if we bought a jacket in the summer and it might not hit the sales floor until November or December, in which case it could be 4 or 5 months old from when we purchased it. But once that jacket has been out on the sales floor for at least 90 days, that's when it becomes aged over 90 days. So it's not the date that it was purchased, it's the date that it hit the sales floor. So if the item is good and we're pulling it from the rack to make room, we don't want to clearance it because it's still good merchandise and it just hasn't had enough time to sell. So then it gets backstocked either for an event or a busy season. An event we might do because we have so much of a category that we want to do some kind of sale on it. So maybe if we have so many women's shorts, we'll do a release or some kind of fun event that features them. Or if there's a busy season coming up, such as back to school, we'll save it for that. But the point is we don't want to clearance it. We just want to backstock it to deal with later. And then eventually that'll get replenished and put back onto the floor and the cycle will continue. So if the item is not good, then it goes to our clearance section. And this bottom portion of the flow chart here is all about clearance items. The first thing we need to ask ourselves when we get here is the item in demand? And again, in demand means that somebody or customers are currently shopping for this type of clothing given the season and the weather outside. If it is in demand, then it goes to our price point clearance section, which will be explained in another video. If it is not in demand, so for example, if this could be women's shorts and it's in the middle of winter, then we're going to backstock it for our normal clearance cycle, and then eventually our clearance cycle will start, and then once it's in our normal clearance cycle, it'll either get sold back up here, or we'll get rid of it in a grab bag event, a take what you need event, or donations, and it'll eventually leave the store that way. So that is the entire flow chart from when something is bought in from the customer until it gets sold or until it gets donated or clearanced out.